Hello everyone, welcome back to On the Fly here, recapping the final day of action from the U18 Men's World Championship happening in Frisco and Allen, Texas. So we'll hop into today, of course, with the scores from today's game, starting with a 4-3 victory for the USA over Slovakia. Yes, it was also an overtime game to add on top of it, but this was an interesting game where it really was the tale of three periods, where we had, or four periods, I guess, if we really take into consideration overtime. But, you know, the first period very much dominated by the US. Second period kind of put on the counteroffensive where we saw the Slovakia take control of the game. And then to that third period we went where we saw the U.S. sort of regain control, and then into overtime where in my eyes the U.S. had the better chances, eventually finishing the game, winning it. But for this game, you know, coming into it, we talked about it a little bit yesterday. It was going to be a matter of how long the U.S. could stay focused. And we saw it especially evident in that Latvia game where the U.S. kind of took a little bit of a nap, especially towards the end of the game after they kind of found themselves up. And that's what it became. And in this game exactly, where, you know, after the first period, the U.S. found themselves up, and all of a sudden they took a little bit of a nap. They let Slovakia into this game. And for the Slovaks, they did exactly what they needed to, yet again, to have a chance to win this one. But unfortunately, the U.S. found their game in the third and kind of played more or less their style of hockey towards the end and finally finishing the game in overtime. But for the U.S., you come in this tournament not expected to do a whole ton. You upset the Swedes in the prelims. You have a chance to upset them again in the semis. Fortunately, you can't pull that off. And then you come in and you get the bronze medal. So if you're looking at a result standpoint, can't really complain if you're the U.S. in this one. But at the same time, for this U.S. team, I think in many ways the medal was what they were looking for. And if you think about where they were expected to be, you're looking at teams like Slovaks, and you're looking at the Czechs, and teams that very well could contend with them. And it's obviously not their best year putting forth the team, but yet again, another year at this tournament with the medal for the USA. So for the US, obviously a result that they were hoping for. For Slovakia, you're kind of unfortunate with the overtime loss and not getting the medal at this tournament. But truth of the matter is that they played exactly as they needed to at this tournament. You think to their semifinal game against Canada, where quite nearly they pulled off an upset. And I know what the final score says 4-0, but at the same time, could have been a lot closer. The Slovaks have been a team at this tournament that have turned some heads, and I think you'll see some of their players get some looks, especially as we head towards the NHL draft. But for Slovakia, a well-earned tournament shoutout. They played exactly as they needed to at this tournament. Unfortunately, just fell up a little bit short, being outskilled and being outgunned by some of these bigger, more powerful teams at this tournament. So for Slovakia, nothing to show at this tournament, a fourth-place finish for the U.S. They will walk away with the bronze medal. And then to our gold medal game. And I don't know, yay? I guess we say yay to that, where we do have Canada winning this game over Sweden 7-0? 7? Sorry, I'm just double checking my notes that I'm reading that right. A 7-0 victory for Canada over Sweden. And I just don't know. And it's not even the fact that, you know, we talked about it coming in yesterday. In our recap video yesterday, we talked about how this game, the gold medal, was Sweden's game to lose. And I didn't think they'd lose it by that bad. Like, they definitely lost the gold. But, you know, for Sweden today, it wasn't even as much that they couldn't get much going. It's just they gave up too much. They gave Canada too many chances. And as we talked about, any mistake the Swedes make was going to end up in the back of their net. For Canada, they played a real good game. I mean, Kovac and net was exactly what they needed. And sure enough, we talked about it as well. The first 10 minutes of the game was going to decide Canada, was going to decide the result for Canada, for this Canadian team, where we've seen all tournament, where the first 10 minutes really sort of determines what to expect for the game to come from Canada, whether or not they'd play well, whether they'd play terribly. And we saw that. And I think we saw that shift where we haven't seen that in any of the games. You know, you think about kind of who they play. You can more or less ignore the prelim because most of those games were kind of walks and they were expected results. And then you went to the quarterfinal. You played a tough Czech team where you kind of struggled throughout that entire game, all stemming from the fact that they didn't find themselves playing well in the first 10 minutes. Then you go to the Slovak game, didn't play great in the first 10 minutes. You sort of saw that travel as well. And then all of a sudden, you're against the Swedish team where they're the big bad Swedes, and you're going to have to bring your game against them, and you're the underdogs going into it. And then you come out and you dominate from start to finish. And the truth of the matter is that the Swedes did not stand a shot in this game. And yeah, more after the first period is what I will say, because the Swedes did have some decent looks in the first. They just couldn't capitalize, and the momentum from there was just too much. And it was that rolling snowball effect that we've seen so often at these kind of tournaments, where you see a team start early and find their groove, and all of a sudden it's all downhill from there. So for Canada today, I understand that I should be happy. I am more shocked about how well this Canadian team played. And I also hope it's a sign of good things to come, because, you think about the last couple years, and at least for Canadian hockey, and this channel has not said the words, your 2025 any championship, or for this matter, the U18 Men's World Championship, Canada is your champions. But you think the juniors, they haven't won in 3 years or 2 years now. Yeah, the women's worlds they lost this past year. The men's worlds they didn't win, and so it's just been this constant cycle of losing for this Canadian team. And to pick up this win, I think is a real good trendsetter for what's to come for this Canadian hockey, Hockey Canada, whatever you want to call them. But the truth of the matter is, this is a big step, and a 7-0 convincing victory in a gold medal game against a team that you were a heavy dog against. And yes, I know many people were saying that they'll be closer than you think, but in my eyes, this win is a convincing win. So for Canada, big win, 7-0. Can't complain about that. I can't even nitpick from this game, because you look at the result against, in my eyes, the best team at this tournament, and you are blowing them out 7-0. It's a good result for Canada, and one where you look at this entire tournament, and outside of the game against the Czechs and a little bit of the Slovaks, they didn't really have much of a scare at this tournament, and they kind of walked through it. So a big win here for Canada. They will repeat. We'll talk about that in the news section, but your 2025 U18 Men's World Championship gold medalist is Team Canada, and they are back better than ever. So to the news we go with If You Build It, and you might be wondering, didn't you not say that last time? And yes, I did. And you might be also wondering, did you change it? And I'm going to tell you no, because when you do the graphics, you kind of flip with the countries, and I put it in order for the gold medal, and then I realized, you know what, for the Slovak team, I think this fits pretty nicely. And it's the classic quote from Field of Dreams, which is a baseball movie. It's, if you build it, they will come. And for me, that quote isn't just a baseball quote where you build the field up and then the ghosts come and whatnot, but it also kind of shows here where if you continue to do good things, eventually the results will follow. And you look back to what they did against Canada yesterday, and they didn't have much to show for it, getting shut out. But the truth is, they played a perfect game yesterday against a Canadian team, and a tough Canadian team at that, your gold medalist, I might add, right? But the truth is, for the Slovaks, they played exactly as they needed to against Canada. That carried over today. They played exactly as they needed to against this tough U.S. team. And sure enough, they brought them to overtime. And for the Slovaks at this tournament, yes, obviously you want to contend for a medal. But at the same time, this team should have lots to hold their head high about. And they weren't expected to do much. And yet here they are, almost upsetting the U.S. So for the Slovaks, if you build it, they will come. They continue to do good things, especially on the international stage. It's only a matter of time before the results start showing, whether it be at the U18s, whether it be at the juniors. I think we're going to see definitely a resurgence of the Slovak team, as we saw in the last couple of years, especially at the juniors. And I think we're going to see that start to carry into the bigger events like the Men's World Championships, the Olympics. These are the kind of the U18s are always one that kind of set the tone a little bit. And yes, I know Canada hasn't been great, but hey, Canada hasn't been great at the World Juniors either. So kind of you can see that trend where the U18s to the U20s, and the results kind of carry through that. So hoping to see Canada back on the stage at the juniors, and I'm expecting to see the Slovak team come back in bunches here as we see them towards in future events at the juniors and beyond that as well at the Men's Worlds and of course the Olympics, which are coming up just a couple months away now. So that's what we have for the Slovaks. Then on to the U.S. with the full 16. We talked about it with the U.S. where they kind of take a little bit of naps here and there, which unfortunately is just part of the game. And We saw that against Latvia. We saw that today where they just kind of let teams back into games. You can't be doing that. But hey, they got the bronze medal, so you can't ask for much more than that. Then to Sweden we go with a shocker. And for the Swedes, this was their tournament to lose. And you lose against the U.S. in the prelims, and it's, here we go, right? Where it's maybe this isn't what we were expecting from the Swedes. Maybe they're back to what they're so used to doing. And then they come out in the semis. They beat the U.S. You know, it's a good game. Yes, they give up some high-quality chances. Their goaltender bails them out. Then they come to the gold medal game, and you're saying, hey, look, the Canadian team hasn't really faced anything. The only pressure they faced ended up almost making them lose against the Czechs. And then we're back to this same part where they haven't played a good team yet. They're going to get smoked by the Swedes. And sure enough, the Swedes end up getting smoked. So for the Swedes, another shocker for them. They've struggled at these international tournaments, and it's just becoming, I don't know if it's the curse of the Swedish team or what it might be. But for Sweden today, unfortunately, they did get shocked 7-0 the final, which brings me to the last news of today with Canada going back-to-back. I think back to last year they won, this year they won. A big deal. And it's one that, in my eyes, at least for me, it's a good step forward. And you think to the last 2 years at the juniors, and for me, everything kind of revolves around the juniors because you see, of course, the results of the U18s carry through, and then you eventually see the U20s translate into stuff like the Men's World Championship and the Olympics and overall international hockey as a whole. And those are the kind of events that, in my eyes, sort of shape what's to come for some of these countries. And for the U18s, sort of correlates with, you take into account 2 years difference to the U20s. That's the sort of result you're looking for. And here, for the Slovaks, it's a big deal. For Canada, in my eyes, you look to the next World Juniors after 2 years of getting struggled on against, the Czechs. In my eyes, it's a big deal. And I think you're going to see sort of more or less at this next World Juniors coming up, it's going to be a different Canadian team and a good Canadian team at that. So that's what I got for the news today. We are now going to move to the final playoff picture where we will see, of course, Canada on top, the U.S. with the bronze medal, and then sort of the path, right, for this Canadian team. And, you go through a tough team in the Czechs where it's the overtime winner, and then you play the Slovaks, and you look okay in that. You give up some opportunities early, but you eventually find your game, and you pick it up, and you play okay towards the end, building some momentum, and then you play the gold medal game, of course, beating the Swedes 7-0. Can't complain about that. As for, some of the other games, and for Slovakia, where they nearly got upset by Germany early on in the quarterfinals, where they didn't play a great game towards the end, but they dominated play for 55 minutes of the game, and then they almost coughed it up at the end. What a tournament this could have been for Slovakia if they could have found the back of the net on that 5-minute power play against Canada. Very different tournament we could be talking about where, they scored 2 or 3 quick goals, changed the momentum of that game. All of a sudden, Canada might not be the team on top. It could be the Slovaks. So always interesting to see at the end of these tournaments, what could have happened, what should have happened, had one result been different. And I think you look to that 5-minute power play for the Slovaks, could have been a completely different tournament. So that's what we have for the playoff picture. We'll now go to the final rankings, where we'll see, of course, Canada in first, Sweden in second, U.S. in third, Slovakia in fourth, Finland in fifth, Germany in sixth, Czechia in that'd be seventh, Latvia in eighth, Norway in ninth, and Switzerland in last place, who will be relegated. And that was one of the games that we didn't get a chance to talk about too much, and unfortunately, just sort of the nature of how this tournament has gone in terms of the television schedule, because this relegation game didn't get aired. So it's kind of tough when you don't know what's going on. But the one thing I will say for the Swiss is that, in my eyes, this is a huge loss. And not necessarily the fact you're getting sent back down to Division 1A, but the fact that you've struggled for a couple years now at the World Juniors, but you've sort of seen a little bit of a drop-off in the Swiss hockey. And to be sent down at this tournament, it sort of signifies that something else is coming at some of these higher-end tournaments. So as we flip to 26, and we'll talk about 26 in a second here, it's something to keep an eye on whether or not the Swiss hockey program will be back up at this tournament. I do expect them to be. But at the same time, we've seen teams the likes of Norway. We've seen sort of teams like Latvia step up at the juniors. And we've seen it because of what they've been able to do. And this U18 tournament can sometimes be that sort of next pathway. And we've seen sort of the correlation between, you add 2 years to what happens at the U18s. All of a sudden, you see those players at this next tournament. So just something to keep an eye on. Obviously, I'm probably overanalyzing it because that's kind of what we do. But at the same time, it's something to keep an eye on because the Swiss team sort of been trending a little bit iffy the last couple of years, especially at some of these tournaments. Just something to keep an eye on because it very well could get out of hand pretty quickly for some of these teams like the Swiss. But Latvia, also kind of down in the rankings. Take that as you will. The Czechs lost to Germany, which is why they're so low. They nearly upset Canada. And once again, very well could have been at the very top of this tournament. Whether or not that could have changed, who knows, right? That win could have very well put some fireworks into the playoff equation, and all of a sudden you might be looking at a Czech-Slovak semifinal. Anything's possible. That's just kind of the joy of it. Then, of course, the U.S. with the bronze, Sweden with the silver, and Canada with the back-to-back gold. We'll talk a little bit now about 26 and what's to come. For the groups, at least, we're going to see Canada in Group A, Slovakia, Finland, Latvia, and Norway. Those 5 teams will be in Group A. Remember, it's that snake format. As for Group B, we'll see Sweden, the USA, Germany, Czechia, and Denmark. Denmark is the promoted team from Division 1A. And what I will say is that it's a weird... I think Denmark is a team that very well could find their way through. They looked okay in Division 1A. But you look at sort of what's in the group, and we've seen the resurgence of the Czech national team, and I think you'll see that again next year. This U.S. team this year was a weaker U18 team from previous years, but we might see some sort of that refreshment this next coming year. Sweden at this tournament, in my eyes, was the best team we saw on paper coming in. Germany's never a lock, so they're always dangerous. And then Denmark, you don't know what's to come. You think about what they can fresh out. You never really know what's to come from Division 1A. So that's something to keep an eye on. And then 26, you're also looking in Group A, right? Where Canada, Slovakia, Finland, Latvia, Norway, where we've seen Latvia the last couple, or I guess this past year at the juniors, really turn some heads. Could be something that could eventually carry down into the U18 tournament. You never really know, especially with some of these younger age groups where it's a little bit harder to track, who's going to be coming in and who's going to be replacing the older guys coming at this tournament, where you think about sort of the U20s, where you can sort of see the path, whether it be for some of the quote-unquote weaker countries, where you can see the U18 track, where okay, that guy played at the U18s, which likely means he'll be there for the U20s. The U18s are a little bit harder to track, right? So that's kind of what we're looking at for Group A. I do expect Canada to be okay, just from what we've seen in years past from this tournament. In Group A, and then Group B, I think is going to be a real good dogfight right to the very end. But that will do it for our coverage of the U18 tournament. If you'd like to drop a like, if you'd like to consider subscribing, tell all your friends and comment down below your thoughts on the 2025 U18 tournament. Until next time, see you.